looks like we've got our shorts category winner this year. Hey everybody, welcome to Mainely Movies. Today we're going to be continuing to focus on long-form Oscar-related content. Best Picture gets all the attention and glory, but we're going to be talking about some of the lesser-known and underappreciated categories, the short films. This year, I got to do my annual Oscar Insanity watch of all 15 shorts again. I know that not everybody's able or willing to subject themselves to such insanity in order to get out to see these, so I'm hoping that this 3-part Rankography series is able to help you out and get you prepared for the Oscar ceremony. If you're new here, please consider subscribing for a variety of movie-related content, like reviews, rank lists, and trailer reactions. I've already talked about the animated and documentary shorts, so that brings us to our final category, the live-action shorts. This category is usually the second most popular of the shorts, and is often shown as a double feature along with the animated shorts, so hopefully some of you have had the opportunity to watch these. The 5 nominees are Lien, Anuja, I'm Not a Robot, The Last Ranger, and The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent. Since this is a rankography, I'm going to be ranking these shorts. But remember, this is just my ranking, not the ranking. So be sure to post your own personal ranking of the 2025 live-action short film Oscar nominees in the comments below. Coming in at number 5, Anuja. This is an Indian submission directed by Adam J. Graves and is available on Netflix. This short tells the story of a young girl forced to work in a sweatshop who must choose between her sister and a chance at freedom through a scholarship. Short films like this are a bit tough to judge sometimes, because not only does it focus on a scenario that affects many real-life kids, but this particular short stars one of those kids, playing a role not unlike her own reality. From the emotion side of things, this movie certainly gets the job done. You truly feel for these characters, and its themes of sisterhood and shared sacrifice ring through profoundly, but the short itself feels a bit lacking in many regards. From a technical standpoint, it's really a mixed bag. There are times when the cinematography is great and things are filmed nicely, but then there are other times where the editing is so choppy or the camera work so shaky that it distracts from what's going on rather than enhances it. But I think the thing that really ensured that this ended up in the 5th spot for me is how incomplete it feels. I don't want to spoil anything for anybody who hasn't seen it yet, so I'll leave it at that, but you'll know exactly what I mean by that once you watch it. This feels more like a proof of concept short with the goal of getting funding for a feature rather than an intentionally made short film. Coming in at number 4, I'm Not a Robot. This is a Dutch-Belgium co-production and was directed by Victoria Warmerdam. This dark comedy focuses on a music producer who, after failing a CAPTCHA test while updating software, becomes increasingly paranoid about her status as a human being. Don't let the 4th place ranking fool you. I really enjoyed this short. Definitely a big jump between this one and the previous short, and I've gotta say, this film and the next few are all about equally rated for me, just for very different reasons. Although I wouldn't say that this film is lighthearted, it is the least heavy of the nominees this year, and the only one that's a comedy. I'm Not a Robot is basically like an episode of The Twilight Zone or Black Mirror. It presents this technological concept that I think we've all encountered and maybe been concerned about on some very small, silly level. I mean, who hasn't failed a CAPTCHA test at some point? Or at least been required to repeat it several times before it would finally work? That little pause was probably more frustrating than cause for existential concern, but I really liked the premise and concept of the story. The performances were good, it was darkly comedic, and it also touched on some ideas that extended well beyond the tech premise, looking into themes of identity, gaslighting, control versus autonomy, and more. Unlike the last film in this ranking, this felt like it was designed to be a short, but it's one that I wouldn't mind having seen as a feature. Coming in at number 3, The Man Who Could Not Remain Silent. This is a Croatian submission and was directed by Nebojša Slipčević. Based on real events, it tells the story of a passenger train stopped by a Serbian paramilitary group in order to target and remove Muslim passengers, and Tomo Buzov, the titular man who could not remain silent in the face of this injustice. I really struggled with where to place this one in my ranking, because this is such a powerful story and a strong film. Even though this is based on an incident that happened in 1993 in Bosnia, this is one of those films that's unfortunately universal and timeless in its relatability and application. Militaristic targeting and persecution of people is horrifying, and the resulting massacre that occurred during this real life incident is beyond tragic. But this film interestingly turns its focus to a group you wouldn't expect. Not the victims, not the aggressors, but rather the witnesses. The people who were safe in this scenario, simply because of the names on their papers. And it's a very poignant examination of how people react when witnessing something so unjust. Do they stay quiet in an act of self preservation? Or do they say something and stand up against injustice? Stand up for somebody who can't do so for themselves. This film showcases both sides of that, never making the people who stayed quiet seem like the bad guys, but rather highlighting the courageousness of Toma Buzov, the man who could not remain silent in this situation and paid for it with his life. This is a tense, claustrophobic film that's really strong, but it doesn't give any context to indicate the real events. So if you weren't already aware of this 1993 incident, or didn't happen to curiously look up the film after seeing it, you wouldn't know that this was a real story, and that this was a real man who sacrificed himself to save the life of a teenager. The lack of context doesn't take away from this film, but I think it would have greatly added to it and its effectiveness. Coming in at number 2, The Last Ranger. This is a South African submission and was directed by Cindy Lee. Set in the Amaka Game Reserve in South Africa, it tells the story of a reserve ranger who, while showing a young girl the reserve's rhinos, witnesses and tries to stop an attack by ruthless poachers. As some of you already know, I'm a wildlife ecologist who specifically focuses on large mammals, so a film like this is definitely in my wheelhouse, and I'm obviously a bit naturally inclined to be drawn to it and perhaps rank it a little higher than many others probably would, at least when compared to the rest of this really strong nominee slate. From a storytelling perspective, this certainly isn't the best of the nominees. The pacing's a bit off, and it takes a very overdramatic, almost melodramatic approach to its more emotional moments, but this has got some incredibly beautiful cinematography and an important and impactful anti-poaching message. The short is based on a true story, focusing on an actual real rhinoceros that was the victim of poaching. So the ending, showing the actual footage and additional contextual information, ends up being the most emotionally effective part of this film. I definitely enjoyed this one, but I can't help but think that it would have worked better and been much stronger had it been a documentary short rather than a fictionalized dramatization. So that means my number 1 Oscar live-action short of 2025 is Lien. This is a US submission and was co-directed by David and Sam Culler-Kreutz. It tells the story of a young couple who, while attending their green card interview, are confronted with an unexpected and very hostile situation. There's always that one short each year that just leaves you sitting there with your thoughts during the credits. And this was that one for me this year. The basic premise here is very simple. We've got a couple and their very young daughter traveling to an appointment at an immigration office so that the husband and father can attend his green card interview. And it's stressful from the get-go. Just the panic and concern about whether or not they have all the paperwork that they need, and if they're gonna make it to their appointment on time. This gets compounded by a holdup at the security checkpoint, and then potential issues during the check-in process. The film sets itself up in a way that makes you concerned about whether or not this man's green card application is going to be approved. But then it shifts into something much, much more stressful and urgent. Between the pacing, the editing, the performances, this compelling short was just really effective at throwing us into this tense and scary situation, focusing on putting us in the shoes of these characters rather than on trying to be preachy about the topic. It just lets its story speak for itself. This is a fictional story, but only because these specific characters are made up. As we learn at the end of this film, this type of story, this scenario, is all too real, and that's just horrifying and infuriating at the same time. Alright, so that's my rankography of the 2025 Oscar nominees for live-action short film. Have you had a chance to see these live-action shorts? If so, what does your ranking look like? I'd love to see some reasoning for your order, so be sure to post it in the comments below. Also, be sure to check out my rankographies of both the animated and documentary shorts, as well as my ongoing daily ranking series for all 23 Oscar categories. Alright, so if you got some enjoyment, insight, or information out of this rankography, I'd appreciate it if you'd hit that like button. And if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe while you're at it to see more rankographies like this, as well as movie reviews. Till next time, this has been Alyssa with Mainly Movies, the way life should be.